Battle of Front Royal: How Jackson Outsmarted Commissary Banks. In May 1862, the Shenandoah Valley erupted into chaos as Stonewall Jackson unleashed his audacious campaign. From the fiery assault at Front Royal to a daring train heist led by Louisiana's infamous Wheat's Tigers, Jackson's men marched, fought, and laughed their way into legend. Could a Union garrison stationed in a seemingly tranquil valley town withstand the fury of Jackson's army? Or would the foot cavalry live up to their name, racing through the night with the audacity to aim for Richmond by supper? This is the story of daring Confederate tactics, Union blunders, and the relentless march to Winchester. A story of triumph, tragedy, and a touch of humor that turned the Shenandoah Valley into a theater of war and history. Imagine the Shenandoah Valley as the Civil War's version of a game board, with its fertile fields, winding rivers, and protective mountain ranges serving as squares that armies moved across in a deadly chess match. Nestled between the Blue Ridge Mountains to the east and the Alleghenies to the west, this 150-mile-long, 25-mile-wide valley in Virginia was a strategic prize coveted by both sides. The Confederacy called it the breadbasket of the Confederacy, not because it sounded poetic, but because its farms provided the wheat, corn, and livestock that fed Robert E. Lee's army. More than just a granary, the valley's geography made it a natural corridor for launching invasions north into Union territory or defending Richmond from the south. Whoever held the valley held a dagger aimed at the enemy's heart. Enter Major General Thomas Jonathan Stonewall Jackson, a man as enigmatic as the valley itself. Born in 1824 in the mountains of Clarksburg, Virginia, now West Virginia, Jackson's childhood was a crucible of hardship. Orphaned at an early age, he overcame poverty through sheer willpower, eventually earning an appointment to West Point. Though not a brilliant student, his unrelenting work ethic saw him graduate 17th in his class. Jackson's military career began in the Mexican-American War, where he earned a reputation for fearlessness under fire. Post-war, he became a professor at the Virginia Military Institute, where cadets joked that he was as dry as the desert and as peculiar as a clock that ticked backward. Despite his quirks, Jackson was a deeply religious man who believed in providence and destiny, a belief that fueled his audacious tactics on the battlefield. When Virginia seceded, Jackson was given command of the Valley District. His initial campaigns were a mix of genius and controversy. His victory at the Battle of McDowell, May 8, 1862, fought on the slopes of Sitlington's Hill, showcased his ability to outmaneuver larger forces. Facing Brigadier General Robert H. Milroy and Robert C. Schenck, Jackson led 6,000 Confederates against 6,500 Union troops. Milroy, an outspoken abolitionist with a flair for drama, reportedly exclaimed to his officers, "If we don't hold this hill, we're damned." Jackson, ever the pragmatist, replied to a similar suggestion from his own staff, "We'll hold it, or we'll bury them in it." His troops repulsed multiple Union attacks, forcing Milroy into a disorganized retreat toward Franklin, Virginia. As Union officers debated their next move, Jackson famously ordered, "Press on, let us make their retreat a rout." Meanwhile, Jackson's opponent, Major General Nathaniel P. Banks, was more a man of politics than war. Born in Massachusetts in 1816, Banks was a factory worker turned congressman whose silver tongue earned him the nickname Bobbin Boy of Massachusetts. Appointed to the Department of the Shenandoah in 1861, his military career was marred by his inability to predict Jackson's moves. Banks had one fatal flaw: overconfidence. While Jackson's troops were lean and hardened, Banks's forces were encumbered by long supply trains and a false sense of security. By mid-May 1862, Jackson had his eyes set on Front Royal, a sleepy Shenandoah town nestled at the fork of the Shenandoah River. Holding the town were about 100 Union soldiers, mostly from the 1st Maryland Infantry, a regiment bitterly divided along familial lines, brother against brother in a microcosm of the war. Jackson's strategy was audacious. By seizing Front Royal, he could drive a wedge between Banks's forces in Strasburg and reinforcements under General Irvin McDowell in Fredericksburg. McDowell, commanding 30,000 men, was poised to march south to join Major General George B. McClellan's offensive against Richmond. By cutting off Banks, Jackson would derail Union plans and secure the valley for the Confederacy. On May 18th, Jackson met with Major General Richard S. Ewell at Mount Solon, a tiny hamlet surrounded by rolling hills and dense forests. Ewell, a colorful character known for his sharp wit, greeted Jackson with a mock salute and quipped, "General, I hear you've got Banks running faster than a politician caught lying." Jackson, ever the stoic, responded, "If he's running, then we must be catching." Their plan was simple but bold. Ewell's 8,000-strong division would join Jackson's force of 9,000 men at New Market, from where they would march north along the Valley Turnpike, strike Front Royal, and then push toward Strasburg. Complicating matters, General Joseph E. Johnston, Jackson's superior, ordered Ewell to leave the valley and march to Richmond. Jackson, unwilling to part with Ewell, engaged in a flurry of telegrams with Johnston. With General Robert E. Lee's support, Jackson convinced Johnston to amend his orders. Ewell could remain, provided the ultimate objective was to prevent Banks and McDowell from joining forces. On May 21st, Jackson learned that Front Royal was held by only a small Union garrison. He immediately ordered his men to cross the Massanutten Mountain via New Market Gap. The march was grueling, with soldiers navigating narrow trails and dense foliage. One Confederate private joked, "We've marched so far, my boots are ready to mutiny." By May 22nd, Jackson's forces reached the eastern side of the mountain and joined Ewell in Page County. From there, they moved northward, intent on overwhelming the Union garrison at Front Royal. Situated 15 miles east of Strasburg, Front Royal was a strategic gem. Its location at the confluence of the North and South Forks of the Shenandoah River made it a natural choke point. During the war, the town's mills and railroads played a vital role in supplying Union forces. Jackson's plan to strike Front Royal was both practical and psychological. By attacking here, he would confuse Banks into thinking the main Confederate force was still advancing along the Valley Turnpike. The Shenandoah Valley stretched out in deceptive serenity that May morning, cloaked in its rolling hills and sparkling rivers. For Union Colonel John R. Kenly and his garrison of 1,100 men at Front Royal, it promised to be another ordinary day in a picturesque southern town. Little did they know, Thomas Stonewall Jackson and his Confederate forces, veterans of swift and audacious maneuvers, were already on the march, hell-bent on wrecking their idyllic slumber. Kenly's troops were a mixed bag of infantry from the 1st Maryland, Union, supported by men from the 2nd Massachusetts, 29th Pennsylvania, 3rd Wisconsin, 27th Indiana, cavalry from the 5th New York, and a pair of rifled Parrott guns. Positioned at strategic points throughout the town and Richardson's Hill to the north, the garrison served as a critical link in Major General Nathaniel P. Banks' line of communication. Banks himself was comfortably stationed 12 miles away at Strasburg with 8,000 troops, likely assuming his position in the valley was secure. But Kenly, ambitious yet green, had a fatal flaw. He underestimated Jackson. Stonewall Jackson, commanding an army that seemed to move faster than the wind, had Front Royal in his sights. With Turner Ashby's cavalry leading the charge, alongside Colonel Thomas Flournoy's troopers, Jackson's mission was clear. Cut off Banks' communication line, seize the town, and throw the Union forces into disarray. Ashby and Flournoy were two very different types of warriors. Ashby, the dashing Black Knight of the Confederacy, was a man of mystery and legend, a Virginia aristocrat turned cavalry genius. Flournoy, equally daring, was a businessman who traded ledgers for sabers, fighting with a mix of grit and theatrical flair. Together, they were a nightmare for Union forces. If you're passionate about gripping tales of history's most dramatic battles, subscribing here means you won't miss a single one. Hit that notification bell, and you'll be the first to dive into epic stories of heroism, strategy, and the human spirit that changed the course of history. Join our community, and let's bring the past to life together. Subscribe now and never miss a moment. Jackson's advance began before dawn. As the sun crept over the hills, Confederate cavalry captured Union pickets south of Front Royal, silencing them like chess pieces swept off the board. Jackson soon learned from these prisoners that most of the garrison in Front Royal consisted of men from the 1st Maryland Infantry, Union. This presented an irresistible irony. Jackson's own 1st Maryland Regiment, under Colonel Bradley T. Johnson, would get to square off against their Union counterparts. A brother versus brother showdown was set. To preserve the element of surprise, Jackson avoided the main road south of town, opting for a treacherous, winding path locals called Snake Road. By 1 p.m., Johnson's Marylanders crested the final hill, sweat pouring from their brows after the grueling climb. Below them lay Front Royal, quiet and unsuspecting. Kenly's men were lounging at their posts when the Marylanders charged. Their first volley startled the Federals into action, scattering them like startled deer. Amid the chaos, a figure emerged, adding a touch of drama to an already cinematic moment. Belle Boyd, the famous Southern spy, darted onto the battlefield like a heroine from a novel. Known for her fiery temper and unwavering devotion to the Confederacy, Belle had been drawn by the sounds of gunfire. Clad in a modest yet elegant dress, she urged Jackson's men forward with fiery words. "Charge right down, you'll catch them all." Jackson, ever the pragmatist, trusted her intelligence. He ordered Colonel Johnson and General Richard Taylor's Louisiana Brigade, bolstered by the raucous Wheat's Tigers of the 1st Louisiana Special Infantry Battalion, to press the attack. Major Chatham R. Wheat, eager to redeem himself after a previous defeat, led the charge with the reckless abandon of a man possessed. Wearing his signature red cap and brandishing a revolver, Wheat shot forward on horseback, shouting for his Tigers to follow. Colonel Johnson later quipped, "He shot by like a rocket, his revolver gleaming in one hand and his voice booming above the din." The Confederates stormed into Front Royal, where they were met with scattered resistance. Lucy Rebecca Buck, a local resident, described the chaos. The Yankees scampered over the meadow like a flock of sheep. Such an undignified exodus was never witnessed before. Kenly, watching the carnage from Richardson's Hill, realized his position was untenable. Ordering his men to torch their camp, he began a fighting retreat across the South Fork Bridge. Flames engulfed their encampment as Union artillery thundered from Guard Hill, trying desperately to cover the retreat. Meanwhile, Jackson arrived on the scene, calmly surveying the battlefield. His artillery, under Captain James Carrington, set up on a nearby hill, pounding Union positions with deadly precision. With Wheat's Tigers and Johnson's Marylanders pinned down, General Taylor proposed a bold maneuver, a double envelopment. While Wheat and Johnson fixed Kenly's position, Taylor's regiments swung to the right, crossing an unguarded railroad trestle to flank the Union line. On the left, Colonel Isaac Seymour's 6th Louisiana Regiment dashed for the South Fork Bridge, drawing Union fire. The plan worked flawlessly. Kenly's men, realizing they were surrounded, burned the bridge behind them and fell back to Guard Hill. General Thomas Stonewall Jackson was a man on a mission: drive the Union forces from the Shenandoah Valley. After smashing through Colonel John Kenly's command at Front Royal, Jackson set his sights on the larger prize: Nathaniel Banks's army stationed at Winchester. But first, the North Fork Bridge stood in the way, and Kenly's retreating forces were determined to make it a blazing roadblock. The ferocious Wheat's Tigers, a motley crew of Louisiana's finest, who lived for chaos and battle. With the bridge aflame, Major Robert O. Wheat led his battalion through a scene that seemed ripped from the pages of Dante's Inferno. Flames licked the air, and smoke blackened the sky as the Tigers charged through the inferno. One man shouted, "If hell's this hot, at least we'll have practice." Brigadier General Richard Taylor and the rest of the Louisiana Brigade quickly followed, dousing the flames by hurling fiery brands into the river. Taylor, his eyebrows singed and his uniform scorched, later reflected with dry humor, "It was rather a near thing. My horse got a bit of a tan, and I think some of my men invented fireproof gloves that day." With the bridge saved, Jackson wasted no time. He ordered Taylor's brigade and the stalwart 1st Maryland under Colonel Bradley Johnson to push through the wooded gap ahead, clearing the road for the Confederate pursuit. Meanwhile, Colonel Flournoy's 6th Virginia Cavalry took the scenic route, around the Federals' rear. Like a thunderstorm rolling across the valley, Flournoy's cavalry struck the retreating Federals from behind. First Lieutenant Henry Kide Douglas, one of Jackson's ever-dramatic aides-de-camp, recalled the scene. The pursuit began and was kept up vigorously, like hounds after a fox. Flournoy's boys were magnificent, scattering Union ranks like leaves in the wind. By late afternoon, Flournoy's riders had caught up with the remnants of Kenly's command near Cedarville. A sharp saber charge later, the Union regiment was in tatters, their colors captured, their colonel taken prisoner, and the road to Winchester laid bare. While Jackson's forces pressed forward, Wheat's Tigers took a well-deserved rest along the shady banks of the North Fork. Their repose was interrupted by the distant wail of a train whistle. Earlier that day, Flournoy's cavalry had severed the telegraph lines, leaving the engineer of a Union supply train blissfully unaware that he was steaming into Confederate hands. Wheat, smelling opportunity and perhaps the roast beef in the Union commissary cars, leapt to his feet. "Boys," he barked, "our nap's over. There's work to do." The Tigers swarmed up the embankment like ants to honey. As the train chugged closer, they stormed aboard, tossing the stunned engineer onto the tracks. The train screeched to a halt, and the Tigers gleefully cracked open the rail cars. What they found could have made even the stoniest Confederate smile. Over $300,000 worth of supplies, including food, uniforms, and equipment. The Tigers, former New Orleans wharf rats, whooped with delight as they inventoried their spoils. One grizzled sergeant quipped, "Commissary Banks has outdone himself. He's our new quartermaster." With Front Royal secured and supplies in abundance, Jackson turned his full attention to Banks, who was now scrambling north from Strasburg. The Confederates, spurred by the taste of victory and a touch of Jackson's relentless zeal, marched through the night. One private joked, "We're marching so fast, I reckon we'll reach Richmond and win the war by supper." Banks, realizing the trap closing around him, ordered a hasty retreat to Winchester. Chaos reigned as wagons overturned, supplies were abandoned, and Union soldiers trudged in disarray. The press soon dubbed Banks Commissary Banks for the vast stockpiles of provisions he left behind, much to the Confederate Army's delight. At dawn, Jackson's forces struck. Ewell's division swept around the Union right flank with the precision of a master fencer, while Jackson's main force hammered the center. The Union lines, overwhelmed by the ferocity of the Confederate assault, disintegrated like a sandcastle hit by a tidal wave. A Union officer later described the chaos. "Our lines broke as if struck by a bolt of lightning. Men scattered in all directions." As the Federals retreated in a panic, Confederate forces surged forward, capturing wagons, supplies, and hundreds of prisoners. Banks's retreat turned into a full-fledged rout, his troops fleeing northward in complete disarray. Winchester was now firmly in Confederate hands, and Jackson had secured yet another stunning victory in his Valley campaign. Though triumphant, Jackson was not without sorrow. Surveying the battlefield, he lamented, "This victory is stained with the blood of heroes." But even in sorrow, the humor of the moment wasn't lost on his men. One grinning soldier remarked, "If Commissary Banks keeps this up, we'll never have to forage again." The twin victories at Front Royal and Winchester cemented Jackson's reputation as a master strategist. His campaign in the Valley tied down thousands of Union troops, buying Lee precious time to prepare for the 7 days' battles. For Banks, the defeats were a source of humiliation. His political enemies mocked him, while Union newspapers questioned his competence. He later remarked bitterly, "The Valley campaign was less a battle of arms and more a battle of wits." And Stonewall had the sharper wit. For the soldiers involved, the campaign left indelible scars. Many Confederates viewed the victories as proof of divine favor, while Union troops cursed their misfortune. One Union private wrote, "The Valley is a cursed place, where men fight like demons, and the land itself seems to conspire against us." If this epic tale of strategy and daring captivated you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. There's more to uncover about the battles, personalities, and politics that shaped the Civil War. Together, let's bring history to life.